Good afternoon to everyone. To ensure that we have a smooth session for interpretation, activate the interpretation button at the bottom right-hand corner of Zoom and select your preferred language. Please stay on mute when you are not speaking. To mute yourself, click on the microphone button next to your name in the participant box or the mute button in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Submit your questions in the Zoom chat to access the chat. Click the speech bubble at the bottom of your screen. This session will be recorded and available on demand on wcf.powerful.co. It'd be great to see you. So when you are speaking, please stay on camera. Thank you to our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Mondelez International, Snack, our agenda sponsors, Mars Re, our silver sponsors, Barry Caliber, Cargill, GCB, Luca, Chocolate. For this session, Dr. Betty Annan will be the moderator for the financial inclusion group. Betty, take over.
Very much, Peter, and thank you all for joining this session. We are happy you chose to join the financial inclusion and living income session. As we all are aware, cocoa farmers have been bedeviled with challenges of having access to financial services to increase productivity in cocoa production, as well as investing in alternative livelihood sources and income generation. It is therefore important to make conscious effort to ensure that cocoa farmers have access to financial services. Financial inclusion, as we all know, is a means of enabling access to and using one or more formal financial services. These financial services include, but not limited to, credit, savings, insurance, and payments. For this very breakout session, we are looking at productivity, investment gaps, alternative income generation investment gaps, financial inclusion products needed to address investment gaps and to contribute to a sustainable living income. The session will be delivering into our various pathways and ladders of financial inclusion. We have renowned speakers and experts who will share their experiences in addressing some of our learning questions that have been put forward. The sessions would be, we will have two sessions. The first session will talk about the financial inclusion. The next session, which will be moderated by Buddy, will look into the living income. At the end of the session, we are hopeful that we will all have a better understanding and financial inclusion contributes to living income, whether all farmers need all financial inclusion products, such as VSLA, digital financial services, loan, credit, micro insurance, etc. And we also get to have a better understanding of the challenges that farmers face in accessing financial services. I would like to go ahead and introduce our speakers for this particular session. For this session, we have Panus Lucas, who is a Senior Insights Manager for GSMA Agri-Tech Program. Panus provides the Agri-Tech Program and its external stakeholders with intelligence and analysis around digital agricultural topics with a focus on innovative business models, emerging use cases, best practices, and socioeconomic impact. He leads engagement and facilitates collaboration with the agricultural sector to support agri-tech program activities. PANUS works directly with agri-services across Asia and Africa, providing technical assistance to guide agricultural value chain digitization. He regularly participates in industry events, and before joining GSMA, PANUS spent several years in leading analyst and consultancy firms with a special focus on operators' digital strategies. PANUS holds a BSc, that's a Bachelor of Science in Plant Science from Aristotle University in Greece, and a Master of Science in Plant Science from Imperial College, and more recently completed an MBA at the University of Manchester. Next to PANUS, we have Azeta Kungo. Azeta is a rural finance officer with the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, that's FAO, based in Rome. She started her career in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food in Albania, working on policy support and preparation of public investment program for the agri-food sector. She was a postdoctorate researcher and a senior economist with the Department of Economics of the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. Since joining the FAO in 2003, her work has focused on agricultural analysis and formulation, food systems development, and inclusive rural finance. She holds a bachelor's degree in finance and banking from Tirana University in Albania, a Master of Science in Agricultural Economics from Ware College, that's London, and another Master's in Advanced Economics, and a PhD in Development Economics from the Catholic University of Leuven, Belgium. We also have with us this evening, Oswald Kawunde, my good friend. Oswald Kawunde is the African Regional Lead for the based Better Than Cash Alliance, a partnership of governments, companies, and international organizations that accelerate the transition from cash to digital payments, to advance sustainable development goals. He looks after the Alliance's African regional portfolio with a focus on English-speaking countries. Prior to joining the Alliance, Oswald working in the private sector for over 18 years with focus on SME banking and financial inclusion. He held several executive management positions for over 10 years in West, Southern, and Central Africa, building and leading various transformation projects and helping companies achieve financial efficiency. Prior to that, he was a financial advisor on local government finance to the Ministry of Local Government in Zimbabwe. So for now, we have these three distinguished speakers who will be speaking for 10 minutes each, after which we would ask some questions that our participants would like to ask. So we would kindly ask that Panos Lucas kindly speak on financial inclusion pathways. So Panos, please, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Hello, everybody. My name is Panos Lucas, and I'm a Senior Insights Manager of the GSMA Agritech program. I'm very excited to be joining the World Cocoa Foundation 2020 partnership meeting, and I wanted to thank the organizers for the invite to participate. It's really an honor. I'm joining this breakout session to discuss how the GSMA supports farmers' pathway to financial inclusion. The plan is to spend around 6 to 7 minutes on content presented in slides, and I'm just going to jump into the slides in a minute. And then we will watch a video case study that is relevant to today's breakout session. Let me start with a couple of words on who the GSMA is on this slide. Now, the GSMA is the Global Trade Association of the mobile industry. Members of the GSMA are more than 750 mobile operators worldwide, as well as almost 400 companies operating in the broader mobile ecosystem. Within the GSMA, there is a not-for-profit part of the organization, which is called Mobile for Development, and it is looking to support services that have a socioeconomic impact. The work that Mobile for Development does is funded by donors. Let's now move to the next slide, please. There is a number of programs under Mobile for Development. My program is the Agritech program of Mobile for Development, but you can also find programs such as the Mobile Money program, the Connected Women program, the Mobile for Humanitarian program, and others. The vision of the GSMA Agritech program is to achieve equitable and sustainable food chains that empower farmers and strengthen local economies. And to do that, we bring together and support the mobile industry, agricultural sector stakeholders such as agribusinesses, the cocoa buyers, organizations which are members of the World Cocoa Foundation, innovators and investors in the agritech space to launch, improve, and scale impactful digital solutions for smallholder farmers in low and middle income countries. We are funded by a number of donors. Our core funding comes from the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, and the latest funding round from the FCDO was used to launch an innovation fund on the digitization of agricultural value chains, which is massively relevant to today's discussion, last year in Africa and Asia. And we now have 7 Innovation Fund grantees who received grants and technical assistance from us. Our grantees are mobile money providers or agritech that partner with agribusinesses procuring crops from farmers, like those which are members of the World Cocoa Foundation, to design and launch a digital procurement solution in agriculture. In our program, we also engage in partnership brokering and are active in research and insights too. Our program focus is to facilitate the transition of agribusinesses from paper to digital for a number of systems and processes in the agricultural last mile. And also we have an interest in supporting farmers develop climate resilience, and of course, to support farmers' pathway to financial inclusion. And that is the core of today's discussion. But let me actually take things one by one. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Now, in agricultural value chains, commodity sourcing happens in the last mile. The last mile is the intersection between the buyers of the crops, agribusinesses, and the producer of the crops, the farmers. This is the case in cocoa value chain, but it's also the case in other value chains. Traditionally, value chain actors such as agribusinesses and farmers have faced a wide variety of inefficiencies and bottlenecks that have affected the productivity of the farms, increased the cost of production, and had a direct hit on farmer livelihoods. And unfortunately, these inefficiencies have been causing bottlenecks in the way farmers can achieve financial inclusion and be able to access financial services and products from formal providers. Handling procurement on paper and in cash increases the risks of theft and fraud, increases the time it takes to make those payments, and also creates an overall lack of transparency for agribusinesses, but also for the farmers. Under these circumstances, it becomes difficult for an agribusiness to run a sustainability or traceability program, which we know are massively important to organizations procuring cocoa from farmers. For farmers, it also becomes very difficult to earn enough to achieve a living income, save to invest in inputs, in machinery, in supplies that will allow them to produce more crops of a better quality. The situation becomes even more complicated in crops like cocoa, where there are usually 2 distinct harvest seasons. that result in a very irregular cash flow across the year. Without the ability to save, farmers require some sort of financing. However, for farmers to access financing from formal channels, they need to have economic identities, which most farmers do not have. These economic identities would actually enable a financial service provider to use innovative credit scoring models and assess the credit worthiness of the farmers and offer them access to a customized product or service that would address farmers' needs. Let's please move to the next slide. Now, digital technologies allow agricultural sector stakeholders to mitigate some of the challenges that they face in the agricultural production. Digital procurement, in particular, refers to the use of digital technologies in the last mile that enable a range of systems and processes to transition from paper to digital. Digital procurement systems may involve a mix of various technologies and interfaces. For example, it might involve a mobile application, a cloud for data storage. It might involve a company ERP system. It might involve other systems and processes powered by mobile connectivity that use SMS or maybe USSD functionality to push or pull information to various value chain stakeholders. Or it might integrate mobile money or even analytics models. For agribusinesses, digital technologies can help to make production more transparent, operations easier to monitor and manage, and supply chains more efficient. Farmers can benefit too, because they can get better access to formal markets. They can adopt the latest agricultural practices and have clearer terms of trade and transparent transactions. Can we move to the next slide, please? Digital procurement tools that agribusinesses use in the field, like the ones I mentioned earlier, and I gave examples of them, capture a wide variety of farm and farmer data. For example, data that identify who the farmer is, such as the name of the farmer, the location of the farmer, the location of the farm or the family size, captures data about the farmer's activities, such as the size of the farm, the agri-extension services delivered to that farmer, and the fertilizers or pesticides that that farmer has used in the cultivation of the crop. And when a digital procurement tool integrates mobile money to facilitate the payment of farmers for the procurement of crops, the tool also captures transaction logs. Digital transactional data, in conjunction with other data, can support the creation of economic identities. And when this digital footprint is shared in a secure way with a financial service provider, after authorization from the farmer, who is the ultimate owner of the farm and farmer data, it allows financial service providers to assess the credit worthiness of the farmers and offer them customized financial products and services that address farmers' needs. And procurement payments using mobile money, shown here as cash inflows in this slide, is the entry point to this digital ecosystem and the entry point in the pathway to full financial inclusion for farmers and achieving living income. Next slide, please. We are now going to watch a short video case study that we produced in collaboration with project partners, MTN Ghana and Cocoa LBC in Ghana Royal Commodities, where it shows how MTN Ghana's M-Agric service, which is a digital procurement service that MTN Ghana developed in-house, is enabling farmers' financial inclusion. Now, the video is 2 years old, or approximately 2 years old. So you will notice that it actually refers to the previous name of the GSMA Agritech program, which was the M-Agri program. It also talks about plans to launch an innovation fund next year, which has already happened. However, the video is very relevant to the discussion today. So I thought it's a great start to actually show how we are actually acting and working towards supporting farmers' pathway to financial inclusion. Can we show the video, please? Thank you.
Over the years, cocoa has stood out to be one of our key economic drivers for Ghana. The agri sector remains this one singular growth opportunity for us, because most of our people, especially those in the rural communities, depend on farming to actually get by.
Mobile money providers can drive financial inclusion and increase their rural customer base by digitizing value chain payments. With the GSMA's support, MTN Mobile Money is piloting a mobile-based solution that enables agribusinesses to digitize payments to farmers for the procurement of crops.
The partnership allows the two organizations to do a user experience research and to go down to the grassroots to talk to agribusinesses.
MTN's M-Agri is a mobile-based application that enables purchasing clerks to record crop procurement from farmers digitally and pay farmers for their produce instantly via mobile money. The application aims to address the inefficiencies of cash-based payments and the challenges of using paper-based systems.
It has improved transparency. The moment a PC buys a bean from a farmer, I notice it on my platform, in my room, or everywhere I am, where there is network.
Digitizing payments with MTN Mobile Money and the agricultural last mile can increase security for both farmers and for purchasing clerks. Mobile money can reduce farmers' travel time and waiting time for payments and can give agribusinesses real-time visibility of the procurement process.
First, now mobile money anyhow. So the cocoa, Debbie or has cow or the bank. Debbie into how the horse is. And so I'm say we bury it.
Digital payments can serve as an entry point to financial inclusion for previously unbanked farmers.
Okay, I feel so now. Start your basa. If you're not going to move on money, Yanis Kamu in the Spanish Africa in the mobile money. So, like any market you, I'm local markets. If I say, oh, we are going to stand a hamu. Happy basa. If you're not letting a mobile money, it be fine.
Thank you very much, panels, and thank you for the video. We are grateful that you've highlighted on the pathways and also talked about some of the inefficiencies that are faced along the chain, with the hope that digitization can address the pain points of farmers and agribusinesses. Thank you for highlighting all these. I'm sure we will have some questions for you later. We'll now move on to Azeta, and we would like for her to give us or provide highlights on the challenges that farmers face in accessing financial services. Thank you. Azeta, please take over. Thank you.
Yes, actually, my presentation, as discussed with the organizers, was focused on something different, which is really, pathways or how financial services are affecting farmers. But if you want me to talk about the challenges, I'm happy to do that as well. So which way do we go?
Yes, we'll be grateful you give your video, your presentation, and if you can spend a minute or two to highlight on some of the challenges, we would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so thank you to everyone who is in attendance. I don't know whether I should say good afternoon or good evening or good morning, depending on the part of the world you are in. So to start this presentation, I would like to reiterate again what has been said earlier, that agriculture is really an underserved sector by the financial services, the financial sector in general, although it's really at the heart of many of the transformative processes that we need in order to face some of the most formidable challenges that lie ahead. Things like having to feed probably around 9 billion people by 2050, while at the same time preserving the environment, and then hopefully having a world, having communities and societies that are more inclusive and less divisive than they are today. We know that agriculture is extremely important for climate and environment, for inclusive growth, for energy, for nutrition, and what have you. Yet it is still suffering from underinvestment. In sub-Saharan Africa alone, just to give you some figures, agriculture accounts, this is World Bank figures, accounts for about 20 to 30% of the GDP, contributes this to the GDP, and employs over 60% of the population in some cases. Yet it receives only about 5% of the total aggregate domestic lending, in some cases even less, even 2% in some countries. And clearly the farmers, especially the smallholders, who are really the vast majority of the farming population in most of the developing countries, have a hard time to access finance, and to access finance that is really adequately structured to address and well aligned with their needs and with their characteristics. Talking about, just to give some context, basically 30% of the demand that comes from rural people, whether it is for agriculture or non-agricultural related needs, is met. And 30% of that is really met by the formal financial sector, financial institutions. 70% is really informal sources, community-based organizations, value chain actors themselves, and so on. The gap is even larger. It's enormous, actually, for long-term finance, where we only have around 98% of the need being met. Now, it is difficult to have figures on access to finance for smallholders, but some studies are showing that even those approaches that hold promise to extend funding to the smallholder sector, like value chain finance, for instance, are only reaching 10% of the smallholders. And this usually happens in tight value chains and for high value crops. Some other figures there, for instance, on some of the financial aspects like access to insurance, the situation is even more problematic. You see that in sub-Saharan Africa, only 3% of smallholders have access to insurance. Digital innovators, yes, big opportunity, great future lying ahead. However, at the moment, the data is showing that only a small fraction of the market is being served by digital innovators, and for agriculture, that only means 1% of the total lending that goes to agriculture is actually going through the digital innovators. However, following the COVID crisis, this might be changing because we have all witnessed an acceleration of digitalization, including in rural areas and for farmers following the pandemic. Now, what are the challenges? for farmers. In general, agriculture is a problematic sector to begin with because it has characteristics such as the reliance on the natural phenomena, seasonality, the big lag in the cropping from the moment that you actually plant until you harvest, very regular cash flows, as Panos mentioned earlier on. If you then add to this also the characteristics of the smallholders, the situation becomes more problematic because they are usually hard to reach. I mean, agriculture in general tends to happen in rural areas that are typically less served by the brick and mortar banking system. And then smallholders in specific the transaction costs of reaching them are much higher. They do not have credit history. They usually lack collateral. They don't have financial data or financial statements, which makes then their screening and the assessment of the credit risks involved in lending to them much more problematic. Now, for smallholders who are nevertheless integrated in tight value chains, where there are good connection with other value chain actors and with the market, this situation can be somehow handled through different value chain finance arrangements. For smallholders who are in loose value chains, this is not the case, and then it becomes much more problematic. And the situation is really much more serious for farmers who are really subsistence farmers who really have no connection with value chains or with the market. And of course, the constraints are both on the supply side and the demand side. So far, I spoke about demand, but also on the supply side, the financial sector, financial service providers are not terribly aware of the characteristics of agriculture and the needs of the farmers, and therefore this is adds to the difficulties. And thirdly, I would also not forget to mention the constraints that are posed by an inadequate context in the enabling environment, a lack of coordination between the different stakeholders, problems with regulation, the lack of institutional capacities, financial infrastructure, and so on. Now, let me go back to my presentation, therefore. Why is it that we care, and why is financial inclusion important for farmers, and how does it affect farmers? Now, this is one of the, as I said, one of the questions that the organizers had prepared for this session, and I'm happy to address it. Although it is not extremely easy to talk about this issue without running the risk of repeating things that are already known or that are simply make intuitive sense, no? So intuitively, we know that financial inclusion affects farmers in multiple ways. It's a great enabler. The different narratives can be told. The most straightforward one is that it enables farmers to make productive investments on machines, on longer-term investment, improve technologies, reduce losses. It allows them to withstand and to handle better risks and shocks. Improve their productivity, eventually invest in their education and skills and general living conditions, therefore leading to better incomes and better, less vulnerable livelihoods over the medium to long term. Now, however, in order to answer our initial question well, we need to go beyond these intuitively plausible, if you want, arguments, and also look at the evidence and what the data say, no? To make sure that we have then better and more realistic expectations on what changes the provision of financial resources can do for farmers, as well as to facilitate better decision making by policymakers, by donors, by government institutions, and better design of appropriate interventions that are fit for purpose, that have also a better chance of being successful. So looking at evidence, a while back in 2019, I came across a study by CGAP that, in my opinion, is one of the most comprehensive reviews of literature and evidence looking into the effects of financial inclusion. It was called Emerging Evidence on Financial Inclusion, Moving from Black and White to Color. It reviewed about 250 publications on this theme, with a focus on the more recent 100 of them that were actually conducted in the last 5 years, starting from 2014, if I remember correctly. Now, evidence from this review that CGAP did was quite interesting because it, yes, reinforced and it confirmed some of the things that we already know, but also shows a more nuanced, if you want, picture on the likely effects that financial inclusion can have on the beneficiaries. One of the key conclusions that came out of that review is that in order to understand the effects it can have, financial inclusion, you need to understand, first of all, the context, the client segment, and the individual you are dealing with, because different instruments, different financial services can have different impacts, depending, again, on context and individual. For instance, digital credit especially represents an important opportunity because it can provide easy and fast access to liquidity for the farmers, but for certain farmers with certain conditions could also turn into a boomerang if we are dealing with individuals who do not have the necessary skills and understanding of the product they are buying into, the conditions that come with it, and the implications on their own repayment capabilities. Another insight from the study is that some of the preconceptions of the ideas that we have on how financial services are used and the impacts that they have are a little bit more nuanced than that. I mean, they don't always work the way we think they work, and they don't always go in the direction that we think they do. For instance, usually we think about credit as something that helps to foster investments. That is true, not always, but that is true. What is also true is that credit is used by people, by farmers, to also smooth consumption and build resilience for them. The same thing for insurance. We usually think that it's something that helps with resilience strengthening. That is true, but it's also extremely important for decision making at the level of the business and therefore for investments. So the pathways, if you want, through which financial services impact farmers so financial services and different instruments can be multiple, and they don't always go in one direction. But they can go in different directions, and they also depend on the type of beneficiaries we are dealing with. Now, evidence shows that financial inclusion has beneficial effects on farmers as direct beneficiaries through resilience building and through facilitating or encouraging productive investments. Financial diaries are provide quite detailed information on the transactions that are happening at the level of the farm, and they have demonstrated how financial inclusion, financial services are really play a fundamental role for liquidity management and for smoothing consumption at the level of the farm. At the level of the macroeconomy, financial inclusion contributes to economic growth, inequality, and poverty reduction, although the effect on poverty is a little bit mixed. And through these macroeconomic effects can also indirectly affect farmers through the effect on aggregate demand. So if aggregate demand is higher, then one can expect farmers benefiting from that because it boosts employment, incomes, and so on. Now, one interesting thing that I wanted to mention is that, as I mentioned earlier, while evidence is really very clear on the effects on inequalities, it's not so clear on the effects on poverty. There was an IMF study conducted, a review again, an empiric study really, conducted a few years ago that used a rather big sample, 140 countries observed over 50 years from 1961 to 2011. And that study found that for access to finance, financial deepening, efficiency, and financial stability all had significantly positive impacts on inequality and also on poverty. Financial liberalization had the opposite impact. On poverty specifically, although this study found positive impacts, there are other studies that do not find any impacts. So it's a little bit mixed. Yeah. you kindly wrap? Yeah, okay, yes. Fine. One last thing that perhaps it's worth mentioning is that for credit and for digital financial services, the evidence is against mixed. There are studies that find positive effects and others. All this needs to be qualified, while savings and insurance are more clear-cut. One last observation, if you allow me to make, is that there is enough evidence to show that too much or too fast provision of finance is not necessarily a good thing, but it can set the stage for some setbacks. No, there's a big, probably the biggest financial inclusion program in the world that was launched in India in 2014. It resulted in about 2 million new bank accounts. 200 million bank accounts. An assessment of this, however, showed that there was a significant increase in defaults on loans in those areas that were more exposed to the project. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't go for financial inclusion and for more lending. It means that we need to be aware of the trade-offs involved and the potential dangers in order to factor those into the design of the different interventions. I'll leave it there because there is no more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Azeta. And
over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would say that one thing that struck me when you were doing your presentation was the fact that only 3% of farmers in the sub-Saharan African region have access to insurance. How then can we use digitization to be able to help address this issue? So maybe you could give it a thought, and then when we get to the question section, you can give us an answer. Besides, I noticed that fostering financial inclusion presents a fundamental enabling factor for the promotion of several different dimensions of development. And you talked about access. I mean, it was clear from your presentation, access to health, education, income, and other benefits. So we hope that for all those who are listening, we'll put measures in place to move toward digitization and a full financial inclusion, so that our farmers can benefit and their development would be more prominent. So thank you very much. We'll now call on Oswell Haunde from Better Than Cash Alliance. Oswell, we would appreciate it if you kindly present on the access and usage of financial inclusion products from the supply side. Thank you very much. Over to you, Oswell.
Thanks so much, Betty, and good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. Again, it's a great honor to share our experiences on this valuable discussion, and thanks to my co-panelists for the insights from the farmer's perspective. And like Betty said, I'll focus more on the supply side role in developing relevant and responsible solutions that we think are important to enhance the farmer's financial inclusion. So, but before I go there, let me just quickly give a brief background of who the Better Than Cash Alliance is and our involvement in the work within the cocoa sector in Ghana. So we are a global partnership that is hosted at the UN to promote the transition from cash to digital payments, working through our members who include government, companies, and international organizations. And Ghana is one of our government members, and WSCF is also one of our corporate members. So we are playing within and supporting the work of our members. So when WCF became a member sometime in 2018, the objective then was to bring expertise and resources to its member companies in Ghana to explore how digital payments could benefit cocoa companies, smallholder farmers, PCs, and a lot of other intermediaries that are working along the supply chain. As you know, that payments is one of the gateways to financial inclusion. So we've worked with more than 7 of the leading LBCs in Ghana to start and scale digitization initiatives in the last 2 years, and we've seen more than 1,200 accounts that have been digitized, and more than 1.2 million that has been disbursed, and a total of 1,800 farmers that were trained in DFA. And based on all these lessons, we produced 2 publications that I'll encourage you to read from our website. If you haven't seen them, One of it talks on the cost of cash in the cocoa sector. The second one looks at the building blocks on digitization of payments, which I'll spend a bit more time talking about. So next slide, please. So just a quick highlight actually from the, so if you could go to the next slide. A quick highlight from the cost of cash study. It actually shows that revenue reduces by 19% due to costs associated by paying in cash, and 3.9 million is lost in interest rate, and up to $15.9 million US through theft, and that's quite a huge amount, and 1.4 million in necessary transport costs, which brings to a total of 21 million that is lost annually due to cash transactions. This means that if LBCs are losing this much, the cost ordinarily is indirectly passed on to the farmers. So an efficient payment system that is anchored on secure digital payment platforms has the potential to save huge costs, both to the LBCs and to the farmers as well. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to spend much time because of our time on this next slide, which talks about the benefits, the overall benefits of digitizing payments. But suffice to say that there's clear evidence that when you digitize payments, there's evidence of improved efficiency, increased revenue, greater transparency, and most importantly, stronger business relationships that are built, like in the case of the cocoa sector, all the way from the cocoa board, RBCs, PCs, all the way down to the farmer. So let me spend a bit of time now on the next slide talking about the 4 building blocks that we think are very important from the supply side to drive digitization of payments, as well as financial inclusion and enhancing the livelihood of the farmers. So if you could go to the next slide on the building blocks, please. So the question that's commonly asked by companies is, how do you go about digitizing payments, and what's the starting point, and what are some of the key success factors that could be factored in? So this is what this report talks about. And it's based on the work that we've done with the 4 LBCs. It highlights the key drivers of success, not only to drive efficiency and security through digitization of payments, but also focuses on how to drive adoption of digital solutions for smaller farmers that eventually would lead to deepening of financial inclusion, which is the access point that we are discussing here. So the first point is the fact that as a company, there's need to know your smallholder farmers. And we talk about responsible digitization of payments from the Alliance side. It starts with understanding the financial lives of the farmers, establishing their levels of comfort with digital financial services, and gauging the demands for those services. And this information then helps to put farmers' financial behavior and expectation at the center of any digitization program. It also serves as an initial sensitization tool, which builds farmers' familiarity with digital payments, and also helps to ensure that the companies are moving at the right pace as they implement their digitization measures. What we have also done is to develop tools that you can access as a company through our website that you can use, like in this case, when you want to know your farmers most, we've developed a farmer survey questionnaire that companies can actually access and use. They can access that from our website as well. The second building block or key success factor is the need to build internal and external value proposition for digitization. And what we have witnessed in a lot of digital transformation processes is that there's a lot of internal resistance to digitization of payments. So there's need then to build that internal and external change management approach. First, ensuring that there's agreement on the objective and scope of the digitization within the company. And this includes working with the PCs, the district offices in the case of the Ghana, and also other partners. Then there's need also to look at rigorously selecting and overseeing the financial service providers that you'll be partnering with as an organization, ensuring that the implementation plans and also the timelines are jointly developed with the financial service provider and other fintechs that you may be working with. It's very important to have that in place and never to be assumed, because once you assume it, things may not work the way you would want it to work. So we've also developed a template for request for proposal from financial service providers, which you can actually use. The third pillar that I would talk about is the need to build a robust ecosystem at the rural level, a robust digital payments ecosystem at the farm level. This is important to enable farmers to spend their funds digitally. Just digitizing alone is not enough. There's need to look at what happens at the farm level, what happens in the communities where they're living, particularly focusing on digital finance access points, and as well as ensuring the liquidity management is in place. DFS merchant acceptance, I know that sounds like very far, but it's something that I think we saw in the video from which Panos showed earlier on, where MTN is working along those areas, and also enhancing access to other digital services like solar panels, agriculture, insurance, and other needs, which enables the farmers to spend their funds digitally. So the last building block that I can talk about, which is very, very important to ensure that farmers are able to access and use digital solutions that are digital financial solutions that are coming, is the need to develop and sensitize staff and farmers' awareness on the value of digitization of payments and digital financial services at large. We are aware from studies that the level of financial and digital literacy in Ghana's rural areas is relatively low. So there's need then to develop materials that can be used to help farmers improve on their digital expertise and use of digital solutions that are available. So those are some of the 4 building blocks that I thought I needed to highlight, which are important from the supply side. Quickly, let me just talk about this interesting last slide on what the farmers that we were just talking to preferred in terms of how they use their funds once they receive them. And this is very important because it also emphasizes the fact that there's room and opportunity for digitalization of financial services. So 36% of the farmers say that they spend their money immediately after they've received it, and 37% they actually put their money in an account, which means they have a bank account, and 27% of them kept their funds in cash. And so this again demonstrates that there's room and opportunity for driving digitization of payments in the rural markets. The other interesting component, which more or less resonates to what Azeta was talking about from the credit side and the opportunity that is there, was that 55% of the cash crop farmers who are receiving cash would prefer digital payments only if it helps them to access credit. So the key, therefore, to adoption and rolling out of digital financial solutions in a responsible manner is ensuring that we build the farmers' confidence, which in turn then will help to scale and deepen financial inclusion. Now, let me stop there, Betty, and wait if there are any questions that may want to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oswald. Thank you for highlighting the building blocks for responsible and scalable digitization of payments. Thank you very much. I have some questions, a number of questions, but I would kindly ask that we just spend a maximum of a minute to answer 3 questions, 1 for each of the panelists, so we can move on to the next session. Sorry about that. We are late now. This question will just go straight to Oswald, since you were the last speaker. What are some of the incentives that can be introduced in the system to encourage businesses to accept digitization? What are some of the incentives that can be introduced to encourage businesses to accept digitization? Please, this is for you also. Thank you.
Thanks. So quickly, I think that's a very good question around incentives. There are quite a number of incentives that can be introduced, but from our angle, I think the biggest incentive for financial service providers and for businesses should actually come from business modeling. the opportunity that avails itself when you're dealing with digitization of payments, and when farmers are also paying digitally. It not only enhances the livelihood of the farmers, but also the merchants themselves are able to create a history of transactions which they can actually use to also access credit. So in a nutshell, I think that's what I can say now. There are quite a number of incentives that can be put in place, both from the supplier side of payment solutions, but the one that quickly comes into mind, which should be considered by a lot of businesses, is the business component, because that's more sustainable. When you have a lot more businesses that are coming to pay through digital means, it enhances the business capacity to access financial services in the future.
Thank you very much, Oswald. To Azeta, I have a quick question here. Someone would like to know what FAO is doing to address some of the challenges and pain points that farmers face in accessing finance. What is FAO doing to address some of the challenges and pain points that farmers face when it comes to accessing of finance? Thank you.
Thanks for the question there. Very difficult to answer in 1 minute, but I will try. We mentioned that the constraints that farmers face are many, and the reasons also, the causes for that are many, to be found in the, supply side and also demand side of the financial market and in the enabling environment. Therefore, at FAO, we try to work at all these different levels and with multiple stakeholders in order to adequately and in a more holistic way address these challenges when it is possible. In terms of so it really comes down to reducing costs, reducing risks, and improving the enabling context. In terms of the thematic focus that we have in our work in this area at the moment is, I can mention digital financial services, value chain finance, financial inclusion with specific then focus on youths, women, and the smallholders. Looking at financial inclusion also in how it relates to the environment and to green finance. And then finally, one which is extremely important nevertheless, risk management and de-risking. We are working at all these 5 areas at different levels. We have concrete interventions in the countries, but there's no time to mention. We have a number of normative products, guiding materials being developed, and we do a lot of capacity development really with the stakeholders in the countries at the regional level in collaboration with the RACAs, APRACA and AFRACA. Some of you might be familiar with those, and also at the global level. We are part of a partnership which is called the CAPFIN partnership, which is very active in the area of rural finance with the participation of the World Bank, CGAP, IFAD, FAO, GIZ, UNCDF, and others. And so we try to address the issues at the normative level by having, bringing all these thought leaders together to brainstorm on the best practices, the lessons that we are learning from experience, and then apply this to what we do really concretely in the countries. Thank you. If anybody wants to know more specifically, I can over email provide really detailed information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Azeta. We would appreciate it if you can kindly put your email address in the chat box so that those who are interested in reaching out for more information can do so. Please, we would appreciate it if both Panos and Oswald can also do that so that our participants who are interested in making further inquiries can reach out to you. Lastly, I would like to ask Panos this question that just came up. How is GSMA supporting digitization of agricultural projects that promote financial inclusion? What is GSMA doing to support projects that promote financial inclusion? Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you for the question. So I walked you through earlier about the pathway to financial inclusion that the GSMA is following. And I mentioned that last year we launched an innovation fund for the digitization of agricultural value chains. So the innovation fund was launched in June last year, and we received around well, more than 200 applications for funding. So we went through a rigorous process, application process that lasted up until December last year. And an independent innovation fund panel selected 7 grantees who these grantees are now receiving funding from us, coming from the FCDO, the UK's FCDO. And we offer them technical assistance to allow them to use this money to design, launch, and scale impactful and commercially sustainable solutions with our support and with the support of other partners. Basically, what we do is the following. We, the panel, the Independent Innovation Fund panel, selected the 7 grantees, and essentially they selected consortia of grantees consisting of the following parties: a grantee, which might be an agri-tech or a mobile money provider, an agribusiness, and a financial service provider. So each of these consortia, what they're trying to do this year and next year in the duration of the grant is the following. The agribusiness is facing certain challenges in the last mile that they want to address. The farmers are also facing challenges related to access to finance. So the agribusiness is partnering with the grantee, the agri-tech, and the mobile money provider to develop a service that addresses the agribusiness challenges while at the same time addresses the farmer challenges and that have to do with access to finance. So the services that are developed by the consortia of grantees result in digital footprints, which when shared with the financial service providers, they can support farmers' pathway to financial inclusion. So in that path that we have followed to support organizations and farmers, we want to actually make a call to action to organizations in the cocoa supply chain, the buyers, to partner with our grantees and together to identify ways to address their challenges through the agri-tech tools, while at the same time supporting farmers to bridge the financial inclusion gap and eventually get access to financial products and services. So whoever is interested to partner with any of our grantees, there's a number of grantees in Africa and Asia, some of them in cocoa producing countries like in Ghana. Please send me an email. I have shared my email address and I can always get you the contacts if you're an agribusiness with our grantees in cocoa producing countries so that we can identify opportunities for partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Panus. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all very much to our speakers. Azeta, thank you very much for taking time to be with us. Panus, thank you very much. And Oswald, thank you. Thank you all for the insightful presentations. We are very grateful. We believe that our participants have a better understanding of what financial inclusion is and how it can be digitized and how they can also take advantage of the situation to be able to improve or scale up their digitization of payments. I would also like to thank Peter very much for serving as the session host, also Chikudu for taking notes, and then also Fabrice for serving as the chat moderator. Thank you very much. I would kindly hand over to Buddy to take us through the next session. Thank you all. Thank you, our participants as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty, and to our previous speakers. I would like to invite Mr. Gabriel Andre, who is a consultant at AMB Consulting, and who can present to us from the perspective of his work in Côte d'Ivoire about certain pathways, certain opportunities there are for driving financial inclusion within Côte d'Ivoire. He will be presenting in French, so please, if you need English translation, make sure that you've turned on the English option on the translation button at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome, Mr. Andre, to make your presentation. Please do keep to the 10 minutes so that we have ample time for discussion. Thank you. And Peter, if you can go ahead and project his slides, I guess.
Merci, Budi. Bonsoir à tous. Je suis très honoré de participer à ces échanges, à ces discussions sur la problématique de l'inclusion financière des petits producteurs de cacao. Nous avons une expérience d'une quinzaine d'années sur l'accompagnement de ces producteurs à travers leurs coopératives et à travers par ricochet sur eux-mêmes leurs activités. Alors, vous me suivez? Voilà. Alors, OK. Je vais intervenir rapidement sur 4 points qui ne sont pas susceptibles d'être très exhaustifs compte tenu du temps. Et juste pour parler des caractéristiques des producteurs agricoles, et quels sont les obstacles que généralement nous rencontrons dans l'inclusion financière de ces petits producteurs, et puis quelles sont les solutions innovantes et idoines qui se présentent à eux dans l'inclusion financière réussie, et puis quels sont les défis qu'il faut relever pour que cette inclusion financière réussisse. Alors, quelles sont les caractéristiques des petits producteurs? Les précédents intervenants en ont parlé. D'après une étude du CEGAP parue en 2018, ce sont des opérateurs économiques qui ont des revenus modestes. Environ 72% de ces producteurs ont moins de 2,5 $ par jour. Ils exploitent des petites parcelles qui se varient entre 3 et 4 hectares. Leur verger est vieillissant, autour de 25 à 30 ans, donc qui influence négativement la productivité. Et ce sont des familles qui regroupent entre 8 et 10 personnes et qui opèrent très souvent pour 90% d'entre eux leurs transactions financières en espèces. Et ce qu'on constate par contre, c'est que plus de 90% possèdent un téléphone portable, mobile, et environ 27% font recours à la mobile money et 36% donc, de ceux-ci peuvent utiliser des comptes qui peuvent ouvrir à travers peut-être l'accompagnement de leurs enfants qui sont lettrés. Alors, leur niveau d'éducation financière est donc bas, de même que leur niveau d'éducation scolaire. Donc, l'alphabétisation n'est pas très, très poussée au niveau de ces petits producteurs, donc qui amène dans ce paysage-là ces petits producteurs à manifester des besoins qui sont souvent difficilement finançables par les systèmes financiers traditionnels. Alors, on peut passer à la diapo suivante. Alors, donc, vous constatez avec moi qu'à travers ces caractéristiques, il y a beaucoup d'obstacles, d'abord du côté des producteurs par rapport aux produits classiques d'accompagnement ou d'inclusion financière que nous connaissons à travers les banques traditionnelles. Les institutions de microfinance qui sont les plus proches de ces producteurs aussi ont connu des déboires. Beaucoup ont fermé boutique parce que n'arrivant pas à satisfaire et en matière financière les producteurs, mais en même temps les services non financiers. Parce que en fait, c'était aussi leur capacité à pouvoir jouer sur les deux, c'est-à-dire les services non financiers, les accompagner, les former, les sensibiliser et aussi leur proposer des services financiers adéquats. Et puis, la communication insuffisante des produits faits par ces institutions financières font que les petits producteurs n'ont pas beaucoup d'informations, que ce soit en matière d'assurance, que ce soit en matière d'épargne, que ce soit en matière de crédit. Ces producteurs n'ont pas suffisamment d'informations. La couverture géographique est assez restreinte parce que la plupart des petits producteurs se retrouvent dans le monde rural, souvent d'accès très difficile. Et comme ces entreprises financières quand même veulent optimiser leurs activités en termes de rentabilisation, elles trouvent que se positionner dans une zone où vous pouvez avoir 20 à 25% de votre activité qui tourne, ce n'est pas rentable du tout pour eux. Et la couverture aussi insuffisante au niveau de la téléphonie mobile, bien que beaucoup possèdent, tout à l'heure j'ai dit un peu plus de 90%, un téléphone mobile. Souvent, lorsqu'ils sont reculés dans leur monde rural, un peu loin des villes, c'est des réseaux qui sont difficilement exploitables. Du coup, l'accès à la monnaie numérique devient assez difficile. Et lorsqu'ils veulent faire des opérations par mobile money, très souvent, il n'y a pas de service suffisant en termes d'espèces conséquentes pour pouvoir faire les opérations de retrait et de dépôt. Et donc, tout à l'heure, j'ai souligné aussi le niveau d'alphabétisation qui était faible pour les producteurs. Et puis, une perception inappropriée de couverture des risques par une assurance, parce que le producteur qui est dans le monde rural, généralement, ne voit pas les solutions d'assurance comme des nécessités, comme une nécessité. Et traditionnellement, ils ne conçoivent pas de payer un service à fond perdu, et lorsque le risque n'est pas manifesté, n'arrive pas, et que en une autre année encore, il faudrait repayer la même chose. Ils ne comprennent pas tout à fait bien ça. Donc, il s'agit de lever tous ces obstacles-là en essayant de bien comprendre les besoins de nos producteurs. Et ces besoins ne peuvent se réaliser que par l'accompagnement de structures souvent étatiques et de structures aussi de financement qui recherchent de l'impact, donc qui ne recherchent pas forcément du profit, mais qui sensibilisent, qui accompagnent, qui forment et qui permettent à ceux-ci d'arriver vers l'inclusion financière. On peut passer à la diapo suivante. Alors, quelles sont les solutions idoines que nous pouvons voir pour pouvoir favoriser, améliorer l'inclusion financière de nos petits producteurs agricoles? Alors, nous voyons 3 axes se dessiner. Si nous pouvons passer à la diapo suivante. Alors, nous voyons que l'inclusion financière réussie dépendra de plusieurs facteurs. On va rappeler 3 essentiellement, qui sont l'engagement de l'État avec une réglementation adaptée, parce qu'aujourd'hui, avec les fintechs, c'est-à-dire les finances technologiques, il y a des solutions pratiques, techniques, technologiques, qui facilitent beaucoup de transactions financières, mais qui échappent à la réglementation. Il faudra donc adapter ces réglementations à cela. Ensuite, au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, il y a l'agence de la promotion de l'inclusion financière qui s'appelle la PIF, qui a été mise en place depuis 2013-2014 pour favoriser un tant soit peu le développement des produits et l'accessibilité des paysans, des petits du monde rural à l'inclusion financière. Donc, ce sont des dispositions qui peuvent faciliter les institutions, les acteurs de microfinance, les acteurs financiers, les acteurs de fintech et autres, à s'engouffrer à travers une réglementation adaptée, à faciliter l'accès des petits producteurs à l'inclusion financière. La prise en compte des besoins des producteurs et leur éducation financière. Donc, pour les différents appuis que nous avons connus, il est question surtout de sensibiliser, d'informer, de sensibiliser, d'informer. Alors, les défis que nous avons à relever, c'est s'assurer que toutes ces populations qui sont dans des endroits difficiles à atteindre, comme les femmes et les ruraux, ont bien un accès aux services financiers. Il faut s'assurer que passer de aujourd'hui autour de 20%, aller à plus de 41% comme le dernier chiffre au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire dans l'inclusion financière, peut-être progresser vers 60 à 70%. Ensuite, réaliser une éducation financière tout à fait comme je l'ai dit, pour que les paysans comprennent mieux l'utilisation et le peu de risques qui entourent l'inclusion financière et qui facilitent aussi les transactions sans pouvoir trop se déplacer et concevoir des produits financiers utiles et pertinents adaptés aux besoins des consommateurs, donc de ceux-ci. Introduire une réglementation adaptée à la finance rurale, donc vraiment refonder le système de la finance rurale à travers les microfinances ou à travers d'autres structures qui voudraient s'engouffrer dans ce domaine. Et puis aider les organisations professionnelles agricoles à se professionnaliser parce que généralement nos appuis se font vers les coopératives qui, si vous voulez, sont un peu les chapeaux des petits producteurs. Et donc, c'est à travers ces coopératives que le relais, que les finances sont obtenues pour être répercutées sur les petits producteurs, c'est-à-dire les crédits d'intrants, les crédits scolaires, les crédits pour développer le risque santé. Donc, ce sont les coopératives qui facilitent un peu ces choses-là. Donc, professionnaliser ces organisations professionnelles peut amener les petits producteurs qui sont à leur sein à s'habituer aux produits et services financiers et augmenter leur inclusion financière. Et donc, encourager les petits producteurs à posséder au moins une pièce d'identité parce que pour ouvrir un compte en banque ou un porte-monnaie numérique, il faut être identifié avec au moins son papier légal, ce qui n'est pas chose évidente parce que beaucoup d'entre eux n'ont pas de pièces d'identité. Et ça aussi, il faudrait que la sensibilisation les amène à pouvoir en posséder pour faciliter l'inclusion financière. Encourager aussi les institutions de financement à impact. Je citerai par exemple Waco Crédit, Shared Interest, Alterfin, Responsabilité Incofin, Solidaridad, etc. Amener davantage leurs actions vers les bases pour que ces petits producteurs-là puissent non seulement bénéficier d'accompagnement à coût très réduit, mais aussi faciliter leur inclusion financière. Donc, pour me résumer, c'est prendre en compte les besoins des petits producteurs, les rencontrer, bien les étudier selon les aspects sociaux, économiques, et puis répondre à ces besoins-là par des produits et services financiers très adaptés, faciles, avec la participation des fintechs, c'est-à-dire la finance technologique, pour que l'usage du téléphone aujourd'hui, qui est très courant, puisse permettre de faciliter les opérations, les transactions qui sont moins risquées et à coût très réduit. Je pense que c'est l'essentiel que je pourrais dire. Si nous avons des questions d'éclairage, nous pourrons les prendre et après les partager. Je vous remercie donc de votre attention et donc à tout à l'heure.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. I would like to invite Anne van der Veen now from Beyond Beans to also make her presentation before we have some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Buddy, and thank you so much for WCF for the opportunity of presenting today. It's been a delight also listening to the other members of this session as well. I would firstly like maybe to introduce our two organizations. I am from Beyond Beans, I'm the general manager, and we work together with ETG, and we're new names around the block. Last year, we participated under the name of CoConnect, which was a cocoa trading company, but which has been integrated in the spring of this year with E2G, an international agri-commodity trader, mainly specialized in grains, pulses, coffee, cashew, and now also cocoa. And the sustainability activities of CoConnect have continued under the name of Beyond Beans. So we're very much entwined as two companies, and we deliver the sustainability programs for chocolate makers, cocoa grinders, and all the way through the supply chain, we are in contact with the farmers. And one of our key pillars as E2G and Beyond Beans is to make sure that there are sustainable livelihoods for farmers by reducing the living income gap. And it's very important to us to offer financial services to farmers to do so. And we've been blessed with partnerships together with WCF, Better Than Cash Alliance, also present in this session, IDH and other partners to pilot new financial innovations in the supply chain. And that has been, for example, solar power initiatives, school fee credits, savings accounts. But for today, I would actually like to share 3 specific examples that we've had over the last years in these specific partnerships, which have allowed us also not only to pilot new things, but also to do extensive monitoring and evaluation to see both the results and impact, as well as key learnings in those specific interventions. So we can actually move to the next slide now, if that's possible. So I will be explaining something on the 3 levels. So one on the cooperative level, one on the community level, such as VSLAs, and one on the individual farmer level. And to start with the first one, what we piloted on a scale was an input credits together with the cooperative or the LBC, for example, in Ghana. We did this in multiple countries, and that is a sort of classical model, working together with a microfinance institute to give a loan, working together with an input provider, and working together with the cooperative. And generally, farmers are reached through the middleman, so a PC or a delegate, and they're selected through this middleman, and they're also reimbursing the loan through the sales of cocoa. We see that in our experience, generally some 300 farmers, so that's 10 to 15% of the farmers only are ready for such a credit. And that is both depending on the credit readiness of the farmers themselves, so how many hectares they have, the yield that they have, but it will also depend on the relation of the farmer with the middleman and of the middleman with the cooperative. So we're also been made aware through these pilots that there is farmers that are not taken into consideration for these credits because they're not coming into scope through those middlemen. So in terms of the potential on closing the living income gap, we see that yes, this is has a big potential because all the inputs are going into the cocoa productivity. Average loan amounts are like $100 to $120, so it's not enough maybe to close the full living income gap, but it's definitely making an impact. However, reaching scale is more difficult, and we have seen that it is important, and many mention it as well, to not only use the data that are made available through the supply chain, so the relationship with the delegate or with the PC, but also look at more data-driven metrics to assess the credit readiness of farmers and the eligibility criteria. And another option is to go from this model of a cooperative to an individual credit, which is also, of course, possible through the data. And we have some experience with an individual school fee credit where we see amounts are a bit lower compared to input credit, but we really see that the default of farmers in such a school fee credit is really low, like 1% or so. So that is something also interesting. And lastly, to increase scale, we must also look at farms which are now not perceived as credit ready because maybe their plantations are too old and they need to replant, or they need some investments outside of cocoa in diversification to other crops. And we feel that it's important also to give services specific to that. So we're actually happy to also work with Advance and in a partnership with IDH to develop and to research and develop specific services for financial services for diversification as well. So that is on a corporate level. On a community level, we are at scale implementing the intervention of Village Savings and Loans Association. So this is building on the social structure that is there and the trust between group members to collectively save money on a weekly basis. We see that there is a high savings in this group, and the $90 is on a 9-month basis. That is the cycle that they have. And many of the farmers, they take out 1 or more loans during this 9-month period, which is also of a nice amount. So in terms of these loans, much of it is used on activities such as trade and business. So that is outside the cocoa agriculture, which means that it's spent on diversification. And that's also an interesting intervention to reinforce diversification. Many of the young VSLA groups, they prefer to have a link with a bank because most VSLAs can actually be unbanked at all to be functional. But if they want to have a link with the bank, it's primarily to keep the cash safe. But we also see as they are getting more mature and they have more experiences, 1 out of 10 of the groups is also interested in getting a loan from a bank as well. In terms of the potential for living income, we really see that this is a very high potential because the intervention generally works well in many areas and is directly accessible for farmers. Also, it's possible to link the VSLA groups with all kinds of sensitizations because you have a platform where people unite on a weekly basis. So you can give sessions on financial literacy, on business development, on child protection, etc. So it's a valuable platform to touch base on other topics as well. In terms of building skill, that is also possible because many farmers are still interested. However, it is important not to look at VSLAs from a supply chain perspective only. We should not limit the participation to members of one cooperative because the trust amongst members is most important. And we can also build on existing groups such as Groupe Tontine in Ivory Coast, for example. The limitations are more in terms of geography and because of course one community might not be able to fit 2 groups, and also some cultures or religions will not allow for loans to be taken out. So those are the general learnings on the VSLAs. Then we'd like to go to the next slide, please. And then that is about individual payments to farmers. Yes, thank you so much. And together with WCF and the Better Than Cash Alliance in Ghana, we have actually piloted extensively how we can better pay farmers on a digital basis. And the key criteria here was to see which of the communities are actually ready for digital payments. Why the community and not the farmer level? Because we see many infrastructure, all elements are at the community. So having the connectivity, having an active cash point that has enough liquidity, but also farmer dynamics such as their own willingness, having a mobile money account and having a phone that serves this. And actually looking at these communities, we only see that 36% now actually is ready for digital payments. But for the farmers we tested this with, this was over a little under 2,000 farmers. Most of them said that they would like to continue to receive the digital payments. However, we are aware that much of that was also due to the fact that we had absorbed the withdrawal fees of 1%. And to scale it, of course, it would be great if such fees would drop as well, so that it wouldn't be such a burden on the farmer or the supply chain partner. In terms of savings, we saw that most of the premium was spent on the use of inputs. That was 1/3. Little farmers were actually saving the money in their wallets. So that needs further sensitization. In terms of the potential, it's not having a huge impact, the digital premium payments on the living income itself, but it's rather an enabler because farmers are been part of the system and they're sensitized on financial services, and they can use the premium as a collateral at a later stage to get credits. But to scale it, as mentioned, we should look at the connectivity, access to wallets, and we should make sure, and that's a general notice as well, that we make farmers more aware of the digital and financial literacy. So concluding then across the board, main bottlenecks are limited credit readiness. So it's important to look at the digital literacy, and also to address together with partners in the supply chain, the infrastructure, and also look at specific new services to the farmer needs. That's it for now. There's much more to say, but I'll leave that for the questions, and I want to thank you, everyone.
Thank you to both Gabriel and Anne. As you all know, we are a bit pressed for time, but I wanted to make sure that I asked a few questions, at least to both of you. Gabriel, I was very interested by one particular thing that you said, that there's a lack of awareness within farmers about what their own financial needs are, and how to make those needs sort of attractive to financial service providers, so that financial service providers can develop appropriate products for those farmers. What do you think is going to be the main lever for addressing that gap? Is it that you have to make a business case to the financial service providers that these are the number of farmers, and if you develop a product for them, then these are the potential profits? Or does there need to be more state intervention, as you mentioned, changing regulations so that fintechs, which are lower cost and perhaps less risk averse, go into these areas to see where they can sort of carve out some competitive space for themselves? Where do you think we really are going to see the biggest movement in terms of addressing that gap between what farmers need and what the financial service providers are willing to provide? That question was directed at Gabriel. Do we still have Gabriel? Gabriel, you're on mute. Okay, maybe I'll have to repeat the question later. Then let me direct my question to Anne. It seemed like in your slide about group input credits, that you almost are taking a sort of graduation approach, where you start with group loans for inputs, and then you mentioned that there is potentially, for specific individuals, there can also be a graduation to individual loans. I had a two-part question around that. One, is that a deliberate path that you're trying to take these farmers along? And secondly, if it is, or whether or not it is, are the terms or the parameters under which a farmer will be graduated from a group loan to an individual loan clear to the farmers, so that they can start to perhaps develop the readiness for that transition?
Yes, thank you, Buddy, for that question. I think one thing to emphasize in the current model, where a cooperative or an LBC basically holds the loan, is that we can really benefit from the dynamics in the supply chain. A farmer is delivering to a middleman, and they are delivering to the LBC, and they're actually gathering a premium payment on top of that, and that premium is being kept as a collateral. So it allows more flexibility of the cooperative to extend a credit. So that is a very positive element to the current model. On the other hand, as mentioned, not all farmers might be reached through the current system. So on one hand, having the data will allow to include more farmers and assess their eligibility. On the other hand, we have also seen that, and that was through the experience of the school fee credit, which works on an individual basis, that farmers are also willing to take out individual credits. And then, of course, the question is, what is the credit readiness of the individual farmer? What is the collateral that he can bring in? And of course, there, having a savings account comes into play, having maybe some things such as a land tenure registration document comes into play. So all these factors that need to come into play, and that's something to develop for the sector. But we feel like we shouldn't only look at the current dynamics that are there, going through the cooperative, but also assessing the possibilities of extending more individual credits.
Okay, so Beyond Beans is taking a sort of activist role in this, right? I mean, do you go to the extent of, because we know that you know, farmers have a very thin file, they say, you know, they don't have a lot of information about themselves, which financial service providers can use to, you know, evaluate whether they should have access to financial services. So given that you are interacting with these farmers, do you go as far as to provide some of that data to financial service providers for those farmers who you think perhaps are more ready for more complex financial services? Or do you sort of take up any role in engaging with the banks, let's say, that are banking the savings and loans, the VSLA groups, to, you know, negotiate anything additional? I'm curious to see to what extent you are perhaps being an activist in your role.
Well, I definitely like the word. It might be too much of an honor to say we're really an activist, but what we do find really important is to gather the information that is already there. Cooperatives and ourselves, we're gathering a lot of information through certification, through trainings that are being done. So it would be a waste if we would not reuse this information to also assess the eligibility for credits. So that is one thing. And to your question, are we already doing this? It is something we're now developing also with some other partners to actually get the data available to financial institutions. Of course, here we need to protect the personal data of farmers, but rather sharing the metrics that are important for eligibility. So it is something that is not in force yet, but it's something that we're definitely developing to allow this individual eligibility check for farmers and to be reaching them personal as well.
And in your view, do you think that those types of programs actually give Beyond Beans a competitive edge against other buyers or trading companies that farmers have the option to sell to or to engage with? Have you gotten a sense, or is it that right now there's not enough differentials between companies that a farmer would be able to discern, okay, this company gives me this benefit, I get access to credit, or that company gives me that benefit?
Yes, yeah, it's
especially in Ghana within this context where the price is fixed.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think both for Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, we are really seeing that farmers are counting on their supply chain partners, so a cooperative or an LBC, to deliver some sustainability services such as access to credits. And that is something that they're also relying on in their relationship. So it's really, and I even spoke to some presidents of cooperatives about this, and it's for them, they know they need to give these credits to keep the farmers loyal. That is one element. The other element is that they also know that they cannot extend a credit to all the farmers, because of course a cooperative is also putting themselves at risk. If the farmer cannot reimburse, then they are at debt, right? So they're the one responsible for the credit. So for them, it's really a balancing act between rightfully selecting the farmers that are eligible, but also as much as possible granting a credit where they see this eligibility is there. And then indeed it has a competitive advantage towards other partners, LBCs or cooperatives that are not extending such services to the farmers as well.
Sure. I wanted to perhaps ask a question of one of the panelists, the speakers from the other, before I joined, and I see no reason why we can't all have a conversation between myself and Gabriel, Oswald, Panos, and Azeta. My question was to Panos. After the initiative that took place between Royal Commodities and MTN, which was pretty much similar to the digital premium payments that we saw undertaken by Beyond Beans here in Ghana, have you observed, any, is the next step really scaling up? So making digital payments to more farmers, still absorbing fees as mentioned by Anne? Or has there been any effort or
I think we lost Buddy.
or creating right. So I'm curious to hear from you, Pano, since you were involved in that project, which took place a couple of years ago. What is the next step? Are you aware of any other companies in the cocoa space that have learned from that and done something similar or done something different?
Yes, that's a really good question, Buddy. Thank you. I lost only a few seconds from you because I think the connection was not great. But I think I'm okay, so it's not a problem at all. So that was a pilot project, you're right. And I think that we actually met when I was in Ghana back then to kind of share some learnings from that project. MTN Ghana is actually one of the current grantees of the GSMA Agritech program. So this is the grantee that we have in Ghana, MTN Ghana. And information is also on the website. They are obviously still focusing on cocoa value chain, but they're also looking at actually trying and testing the success of this project, of this agritech tool, if you like, in different value chains. Specifically for royal commodities and the original agribusinesses, the plan is to actually scale up, and you're absolutely right. And to do that, there's a number of considerations. So you mentioned, for example, the transaction fee or various mobile money fees. One thing to note here, and that's very interesting because we spent a lot of time, maybe not in the last 7 months due to the pandemic, but up until before that, we used to spend a lot of time in the field to actually understand more, not just what the agribusiness needs and wants, but also what the farmer needs and wants. And what's interesting, what we noticed was that many of the farmers, they need to actually spend money to travel to the closest location to where the purchasing clerk is based, or maybe the location where the crop, the cocoa, is actually gathered to get paid, and actually wait in the queue for a long time and get the payment in cash. And that is a process that is not very pleasant to them, because they might have to actually spend the whole day and pay for a way to get there, or maybe walk for a long time and so on. So they do actually incur a cost. And even when they do that and they incur a cost, they don't think about the real money that they have to spend and how much the time is actually worth, to kind of compare that against the cost of being paid in mobile money and having to pay for the cash out fee. However, the plan for MTN Ghana and for actually any mobile money provider who's involved into B2B payments in agriculture is to create this digital ecosystem, this mobile money ecosystem in the location where the farmers are based, so that if that ecosystem is actually in place, the farmer, having built trust to the service, to the mobile money service, and to the buyer that buys their crops, they can actually not cash out immediately and use this money to pay for other services digitally in their community, so that they don't need to actually incur that fee. And another benefit, collateral benefit, if you like, that we have noticed is that many of the farmers, especially female farmers, they actually choose to keep the money in their wallet, in their digital wallets, as an informal way of saving. And that's very important. And that actually is a behavior which is mainly in women than in men. And that is important because it actually exemplifies how they can use a digital service to not only create this economic identity, but already start saving towards something. And that something might be something small or something bigger, related to the farmer, related to their everyday lives.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, we haven't explored at all the gender aspect of all of this, right? But that's certainly a very interesting point, because we do know that, you know, the VSLAs tend to be heavily subscribed by women. So perhaps when you're doing DFS initiatives, it would make sense that women would use that tool to also save. I wanted to bring you in, Oswald, because I'm aware that, as you mentioned, BTCA recently published a publication on the cost of cash within the cocoa value chain. And that was basically analyzing the various expenses that are associated, that are borne by the actual LBCs, and how that information can help them to decide whether or not they want to, you know, absorb some of these costs for the farmer, given that in reality, some of those costs may be lower than the costs that they incur of, you know, operating in cash. So I wanted to hear from you, Oswald. What has been the response from LBCs on that? Because I think that there needs to be, both on the farmer side, there needs to be education, sensitization, but there also needs to be quite a lot of work done in you know, the value chain partners, the LBCs, in terms of getting them to see the value of really supporting this financial inclusion initiatives from farmers. How optimistic are you? Are you getting a sense that they really appreciate the value of financial access, or even just digital financial services? And are you seeing any movement in that regard, in terms of more discussion about initiatives to push that?
Thanks, Bad. I think what we are optimistic, and we remain optimistic, because this is the big agenda that we think is important for both for farmers and also for LBCs to take that road. And I think the evidence is there to demonstrate that there are definite benefits that come from digitization of payments and financial services at large. And what we are seeing going forward, I mean, what we're expecting going forward is actually that this is becoming more of, it has become a national discussion now with the government of Ghana, your way, Buddy, and everyone else, that recently the Minister of Finance launched a Cashlight roadmap. And also there was the launch of the DFS policy, which were launched in sometime in May this year. And the focus there is also to ensure that there is a last mile digitization of financial services. So in a way, I think even if the LBCs may not be, which is not the case in this case, well, what we're seeing is that there is also that intention and willingness to move things forward. Of course, the challenges are there. We don't want to assume that there won't be challenges in digitization of financial services by LBCs, but the key thing is that the willingness is there. And the most important thing for us from the Alliance side is also to note that even from the government side, there is that drive. And so whatever challenges that could be faced, be they from a regulatory perspective, in building ecosystems, there is already a huge national drive to go digital, which is an advantage, which is a plus for the cocoa sector. So I think from the study that we've done, both the studies, there is really willingness to move from there. I think the risks that we've been highlighted, even I think in the presentation by Azeta Shichi and also from Panos, he also mentioned some of the challenges, which also around cash, which includes, apart from the theft that we talked about of 15.9 million, there is also a cost that one does not really quantify, which is a cost to life. And all those are some of the things that I think LBCs really want to get over. But the journey is starting. There is still a lot to be done, particularly in building an inclusive payments ecosystem in the rural markets and the farming communities. But the willingness is there. The financial service providers are willing to come in and partner. The fintechs are also innovating, and great thanks to the organizations like GSMA who are helping with some grants to de-risk some of the initiatives that we are seeing coming into the cocoa sector.
Great. So
can I just add a comment here, Buddy?
Go ahead, Panos.
Yeah, thank you. So I totally agree with what Oscar was saying, and I think that what in any of these services, what we actually need to keep in mind is that there needs to be a very strong value proposition for each and every party that is actually involved into a digital agriculture project, because otherwise these projects are not sustainable. If there is not a strong value proposition for the agribusiness, eventually the agribusiness is just going to die out the project, and that's going to be the end of it. And I think that's another thing I want to mention here, which is relevant to the question of what Oswald was saying. There was a study run by CGAP a couple of years ago in Uganda in coffee value chain. And the study was actually called Digitizing the Payments in Agriculture, Is Mobile Money Cheaper Than Cash? And interestingly, and that was done with Chiagalani Coffee, a coffee buyer in Uganda, when they actually compared the cost of paying farmers using cash versus the cost of paying farmers using mobile money, what came out was that when paying using mobile money, the cost was 27% lower, which is massively interesting because it actually shows that there is a business case for paying farmers using mobile money.
The cost to who, Panos?
The cost for the agribusiness.
Wow, okay, interesting. 37, yeah. That's quite significant.
27% lower, yeah. And specifically when it comes to direct cost savings, these were actually 59%. So the numbers were actually quite impressive, but the thing is that the real cost of cash is not really known. And I think that the study from Better Than Cash Alliance actually managed to get that and examine that in Ghana and the LBCs. And that was really interesting to see in a publication coming from such an organization.
Great. So actually, I think we have Gabriel back. So I wanted to ask a question to you, Gabriel, because you mentioned the need for regulatory reform. And also, I linked that to the other point that you made about needing to open up the space for fintechs and other low-cost providers who can, financial service providers who can come in and compete for this population. How would one go about really doing that? I mean, within the context of Côte d'Ivoire, are there some clear changes in regulation that you think need to be made in order to allow for fintechs to thrive, or for fintechs to basically have the free reign to go after these customers? And in addition, are there the necessary consumer protection guidelines in place in order to protect this vulnerable population who, if the regulations around fintechs playing in the market is changed and there's a proliferation of fintechs, this same population are the ones who are most vulnerable?
Merci, Bodi, pour ces questions. Pour les questions réglementaires, justement, ne peut faire en Côte d'Ivoire des opérations financières qu'une entreprise qui a obtenu l'autorisation au niveau du ministère de l'économie et des finances et par les accords de la BCAO de l'UMOA, c'est-à-dire toute la réglementation financière en Afrique de l'Ouest. Donc, il faut devenir un établissement financier en tant que tel pour pouvoir faire des transactions financières. Ça amène donc tous les fintechs à proposer leurs produits via des banques ou établissements financiers. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ne peuvent pas opérer directement sur le terrain en collectant soit de l'épargne ou en donnant des crédits parce qu'ils n'en ont pas le droit. Donc, ils sont obligés de passer par des banques ou des institutions financières. Notamment, il y a des expériences même avec aussi la téléphonie mobile. Donc, tout cela converge. Donc, il y a un écosystème qui se constitue. Et je sais qu'il y a les expériences avec le groupe Advance et puis aussi une autre banque qui permettent donc de s'associer à la téléphonie mobile et au fintech pour proposer quelque chose de moins cher d'abord et de plus fluide à travers les fintechs. Donc, il faut obligatoirement que ces fintechs-là soient associés à un écosystème financier avant de pouvoir opérer. Au niveau de la sécurité des producteurs, ce que nous avons toujours recommandé, c'est qu'au niveau du cacao surtout, que ces producteurs-là appartiennent à des sociétés coopératives, c'est-à-dire des coopératives qui constituent un peu le garant ou l'intermédiaire par rapport à tout l'écosystème financier. C'est-à-dire que les banques, les assurances et toutes les structures qui devraient intervenir vers les petits producteurs passent par un filtre qui est la coopérative. Et donc, c'est la coopérative qui va étudier les propositions de services financiers ou de crédits ou d'assurance applicables à leurs producteurs et ensuite remonter les informations des producteurs qui peuvent rentrer dans les conditions proposées pour accéder à ces services et ces finances pour que, au moins, d'abord s'assurer que les opérations vont être bien menées et qu'ensuite, le petit producteur ne soit pas grigé par un opérateur quelconque qui irait directement vers lui. Et cependant, il y a des courtiers ou des courtiers qui contournent les coopératives pour s'adresser directement aux petits producteurs. Mais je pense qu'avec l'appartenance à la coopérative, les risques pour la sécurisation des opérations des petits producteurs sont plutôt garantis.
Right, and as I mentioned, I mean, I think this population is quite vulnerable, and so perhaps at this first stage where farmers are perhaps being introduced to financial services for the very first time, it's important to have that additional level of security. And financial service providers just need to do the work, essentially, to engage with cooperatives, educate them, and then be able to convince the farmers of the value proposition that they can provide. Okay, so unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. And also that means at the end of the 2020 partnership meeting. As I mentioned earlier, there's still lots of stuff in the platform. I would encourage you please to go and check out the Leadership Voices videos that you will see on the agenda for today. Those are really quite interesting videos and provide a lot of context and color that unfortunately we could not infuse because of time. And I really do again want to thank our speakers from both the sessions, and also would like to thank Betty and Peter for their assistance in this session. Hopefully the next partnership meeting, we can actually see each other in person. Even better if it's without masks, but it would be great even just to see each other in one actual venue. So I'd like to thank everyone again for your participation today, especially the panelists, the speakers. Really appreciate your contributions and wishing you all the best. Please stay safe.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Portez-vous bien.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks. Bonne soirée.
Bonne soirée à tous.
Bonsoir.
Thank you, everyone.
Bonsoir
Thank you, buddy.
à tous.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you, Peter. And thank you to all the panelists and the moderator. Have a lovely evening.